Good evening. This open meeting of the Community Preservation Committee is being conducted using a hybrid setup consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, Community Preservation Committee is convening in person and using video conference via Google Meet as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. And so as a preliminary matter, this is Jason Molina. I am the chairperson of the committee, and today is September 12th, 2022. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Rajesh?
Present.
Deborah?
Present.
Melanie?
Present.
Martha?
Present.
Gail?
Present.
Perna?
Present.
Jim?
Present.
Kathy?
Present.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Rowan?
Present.
Okay. We are now called to order. And our first order of business is review and approve the minutes from August 1st, 2022. Are there any questions or concerns relative to the minutes? Okay, not hearing any. I'll take a motion to approve said minutes.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor of the minutes as they're posted to the drive, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed? Okay, approved. Okay, next order of business is a staff update regarding the available funding from the CPC funds.
Yes.
Rowan, please.
So I just reached out to our accounting department to clarify and confirm how money, what kind of funds are in our accounts. Just to go through briefly, we do have about 1.5 million with fiscal year 22 and estimated 23 revenue. And then assuming we get when we get the matching funds at around 30%, will be approximately 1.8 million. The other piece to note that did come up in conversations with staff and the coalition was that at the time of our votes to recommend to town meeting, we are going to be able to appropriate estimated fiscal year 24 funds as well if we choose to, which is actually approximately $800,000 more. Now, we can get into that later as to whether we want to do that, what kind of benefits that might have or some costs, but that is a new development that we're newly aware of now, that we can use these funds. So that's about it. Any questions?
Does that mean if we choose to appropriate fiscal year 24 money now, does that mean that would be that much less when that particular year comes up for appropriations?
That would be my understanding. Again, we could get some more information and, provide you with a more thorough review, but at this point, yeah.
Right, and certainly, what's being drawn down from these requests right now is the monies that are currently there, that at least the 1 million or so. And as we get into the January, February timeframe, everything's we'll know it all the requests and all the monies going forward. So I think it'll be clear as we move into the year. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Any other questions relative to the budget? Okay. All right, moving on. So next, also with Rowan, is reviewing the Google Drive folders and resources.
Yes. So it has come to my attention that the Google Drive may be a little hard to navigate for some, and I just want to get us all in the same field when we are reviewing these eligibility forms. Make sure, I'd like to take a moment to make sure that we're all able to access the eligibility forms and the corresponding Google spreadsheets that are in the folder. Now, for those that don't have computers, that's fine. You can call the planning department. We could go through it over the phone or in person. But in general, I just shared the link with everyone for those that do have their computers in front of them. And this is the link to our complete CPC folder. And so you should be, if you click that link, it'll bring you to our full list of folders. And just to go through, if you want, if you're able to catch up with me right now, we'll go to the Eligibility Forms is a folder under that larger CPA folder. And within that, I'm filing these forms under 2022, giving us room to grow over the years. And you'll see the scanned PDFs of all of the eligibility forms. So again, that's how I'm cataloging, categorizing them. And if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call later. We can talk through the technicals. I will say as well, Jason, you created a project submission questionnaire, kind of, actually, well, it's actually more of a spreadsheet with your questions. So feel free to read through those as we discuss. That's going to be a way that I'll be collecting your questions, and if there are things that I need to be following up on between tonight's meeting and the next, please put them in there. Send me a quick note that you've added some questions if you feel that it's something staff could look up in the meantime, okay? Anything else on that?
Yeah, just one point as you remind us as well, which is that these files are for submissions through into the file, but it's not a place for deliberation or for any comments. So just be cautious on that. It's not not for back and forth comments. Again, just posting questions. Mainly with the audience of Rowan to look and see how we can get an answer to those questions. Okay.
Quick question on that.
Yes.
So I saved the link the file link that you sent. I saved it as a page. So next time you send another link, I don't need to save it again, right? I can just click the same page and it should come up with updated files where whatever you posted there.
Something handy too, and I'm not sure if you've already done this, but you can star folders in Google Drive. That's by, let me see, I think it's a right click, and it brings you up a list of options. So that's always helpful to get you back to either that primary folder or if you want to star your eligibility form folder, you can do that too. So I know it's not always intuitive if you don't use this platform, so I think.
I have one question.
Yes.
With the application forms, the eligibility application forms, were any of them, did they have extraneous material that did not show up on the, in the Google Drive? That was it for everybody?
It should have been complete. If you.
Okay, because I noticed one or two had pictures, the
Yeah.
Traily Lane one and so on, and some of them seemed a little,
Well,
bare bones,
and that's maybe just following the description at the top that you can attach additional.
You can, yes, you don't have to, I guess.
So.
Okay, I just wondered if any had been left off.
Yeah, not intentionally. If you see come across anything.
Okay.
But.
Okay. All right. Anything else relative to the drive and navigating? Cool. All right. Moving on. All right. Next order of business is review and vote on eligibility forms. Again, this is where we'll talk about each of the projects as you see listed here. We'll go one by one. We'll express, we'll go around the room commenting on our thoughts about the eligibility. We'll also provide feedback that we received from the Community Preservation Coalition as part of our first year check-in with them and going through this process. They were so kind as to give us some initial read on their perspective of these eligibility forms. And of course, though, it is this CPC body that will make that determination. So that's our role. The other thing to consider here is that eligibility is not approval of said project. It is merely an eligibility check, right? Is this fall in line with what CPA was all about and what is allowable under that statute? So that's that perspective. Also, something is eligible, it could be the best project in the world, but if it doesn't line up strategically for this particular year, or other factors, and we'll get into that discussion as we get into the next meetings. But that's where a project may not be right fit for the right time. So when that's not something that we're determining tonight. Again, this is an eligibility check. Is this allowable? And any questions or comments that we want to send back to the applicants to see if there's anything else we need to glean from them, or if we need to have any other takeaways with other departments or any other entities to give us information about checking this forward. Okay, so with that said, let's go first with Arrowwood Park.
May I interrupt briefly?
Yeah,
Just
please.
Go over the additional sheet of paper that I've printed out and
Yeah.
provided.
Yeah, please, thank you.
This is just something I threw together this afternoon. I figured it might be helpful. They're simply draft motions to help guide your thinking. Obviously, you can use these, don't use these, but options 1 through 4 go through just a kind of high level, again, simply draft language if you'd like to use this. The first one is, it's eligible, and we're going to invite the applicant to apply. Option 2 is it's eligible if, and then there's a number of conditions that may or may not apply. We can, again, talk about that as we get through. Option 3, we might need more information. And, option 4 is just, this is not eligible at this time. I just figured this might be a little helpful. Again, we don't have to make these determinations on all of the projects tonight. We may not, but just for your information. And if anyone has any amendments or edits to these, again, simply drafts, so.
Okay, and this is good. Thank you. I think definitely goes in line with our preparation for you and I preparation for this meeting. So I appreciate formalizing here in these choices here. So for the rest of the committee to weigh in on. All right. Well, certainly, like I said in the last meeting, this process will be bumpy, and so we will we'll go slow tonight. And the idea is that we will we'll step through them. So let's get started. The first one is there a question? Deborah, is that something? You have a question? I can't see the comments, so.
Deb,
I was just asking Rowan to please email me the draft motions that she mentioned.
sorry, of course.
That's
Coming
okay.
right to
Thank you.
And Rowan, are you going to be displaying this while we go through it on the Google Meet, or?
Would you like me to? The eligibility forms?
Sure, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
we can.
Okay. Well, let's get started with. I'll entertain anybody who wants to have first comments on Arrowwood Drive Playground.
I have a comment.
Yep.
I would think that this is an eligible project, but successfully completing this will be heavily dependent on how much involvement the Parks Department can provide. It looks like it's going to be something that will involve them heavily, and without knowing what their other demands on their time are, I don't know how we can figure that out. But overall, I would say this is an eligible project.
So the only question or comment, Jason, that I had on this is I see on here that there's a K playground assessment. Is there a reason why, and I'm just curious, if there's a reason why that would not be part of that review from the playground assessment? Like, would that fall underneath that as something that should be done first prior to taking individual playgrounds and just popping them out? If there's going to be a general playground assessment, should that not be encompassing of all playgrounds?
So what you're referring to is the other applicant, which is proposal to look at all the townwide playground assessments. That's the 11th option.
Yeah, K.
Right, K.
Yeah.
So they're each application should stand on its own merit.
Okay.
At this point, it's an eligibility check. So I think that's a prime example of like when we get to the the full application process to say, given these two, does it make sense? And maybe it is strategic. So I think this is one of the cases why it is so important to be working with a town's department that owns this land, right? They have a caretaker of this land and say, I know you want to look at all these areas, all these playgrounds across the town, but any reason why to hold this one up, right? And can you work with this entity, with the applicant, any other bodies to get this forward? So I don't think it has to this time have to be one versus the other. I think at this time it's about the eligibility. Does it stand on its own merit?
Can I provide some additional information?
Yes.
That might be helpful. This applicant is a resident of the area. She approached me as we kind of advertised in our workshop. If you have an idea, come to the planning department. We'll set up a meeting with the relevant town department to get the conversation started. So that initial meeting happened. This applicant met with representatives from DPW and the Parks and Rec department and just spoke about the general feasibility of it, and they kind of worked out some next steps around getting a more precise quote and going out to kind of fine-tune what the scope of the project is going to be about. At this point, they've submitted kind of a project description that captures the broadest possible reaches, which would be a design and installation of playground equipment. But again, as you see in the CPA funding request, there's a large range depending on whether it's just design, whether it's the full package. So they weren't sure after that initial meeting what the exact scope would be, but we'll fine tune that by the time we, if we were to invite them back for a full funding application. So that's the kind of background on that. And again, all the submitted material here was put together by the resident who definitely has taken some time to work on this and put it together. And she actually brought this to our meeting. So this is, at this point, simply the residents' work.
Okay. Yes. Gail.
I have a response to Jim as well. I kind of thought the same thing when I was reading over these proposals. Before I comment on that, I have a procedural question. As a committee, what latitude do we have in recommending a different track or going in a different direction to a group? My thought is that proposals 1, 2, and 11 are kind of all similar regarding the playgrounds. And I agree with Jim that it seems as though if a committee of all the neighborhood playground people could get together with Parks and Rec, with DPW, whatever, and put together a more comprehensive plan that covers all of the recreational facilities in those neighborhoods, that it may be, and phase it out. Maybe the first phase is okay, we do an assessment of what are the needs of all these playgrounds are. And, 6 of them need this, 5 of them need that, 11 of them, 12 of them need this, and then go from there. To me, it's a little bit premature to start piecemealing it. But I don't know if we have that jurisdiction to recommend that, or is that something that just, people have to do on their own? As a committee, can we guide them that way, or without making a proposal for them?
I absolutely. I think that it's in our wheelhouse to point this out, right? Because it is an opportunity for more collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
I still of the belief that each applicant is owed a response based on their own eligibility,
Sure.
right? They brought this idea forward, and who knows? Maybe you wouldn't have had number 11 kick up if it wasn't for these 2 applicants who said, hey, there's a need in my local community, right? So I applaud those applicants for bringing this forward because, again, this may not have been holistically looked at. So I think there is a potential. I don't think we should say no at this time for eligibility check, because the potential is there that, in this case, Parks Department could be saying, hey, I agree with you. This looks bad, or no, I think we should hold off, right? We have to let those parties work this out, because again, they have a hook into this to say, am I going to sign off on the co-sponsorship, right? So, speaking of which, do we have an update on the co-sponsorship from them?
So, thank you. No, we do not have the co-sponsor signed yet. And that is, I think for kind of the reasons we're talking about right now. At that initial meeting, it was not finalized enough. Parks and Rec, I believe, did not feel ready to, but I think that kind of leans into one of these options that I've drafted, is that the committee could request a comment or sort of a statement from a potential co-sponsor department on whether they feel it's feasible, whether they intend to move forward with the co-sponsor form, and perhaps that can inform our eligibility decision as well. Because if Parks and Rec decide it's not feasible, we could still provide them with an eligibility determination, but I also think it may be it might be in everyone's best interest to also inform them that, hey, look, maybe this isn't feasible at this time either. What does the committee think of that? That may be a path to move forward with something like this.
So just another comment, and again, I know you said going slow, so I appreciate the fact that we're going slow, right? So, and maybe it's just my misunderstanding or not lack of, so is tonight just purely a check the box, right? Is tonight just hey, the application is 100% complete, there's no element missing from it? Or is tonight a discussion like we're having about each individual and the merits of each? Like, I guess I'm just trying to make sure that I don't overstep what tonight's agenda is.
No, of course. So the idea is that we've put the deadline out there saying have eligibility forms by a certain time frame. Tonight's meeting is scheduled to be a review of those applications to see if they fit eligibility. We're taking advantage of the fact as we're looking at the schedule ahead of us, saying, if there's a project that really checks the boxes as far as the of eligibility or not, let's say something now to the applicant to give them more time to either fill in any questions. Ultimately, we set our own goal to be complete in next month's meeting. So if we don't get to a certain applicant today, reviewing them, we have to finish by next. By October meeting. So just taking advantage of the time, being ahead of time.
Should we table discussion about each individual one and just really focus on whether it's eligible or not?
No, I think it's a good discussion. I think we should time box this thing so we don't spend 2 hours on one applicant. But I think that the idea is if there's questions, if we think eligibility is going to be based on another party's determination or questions, then we should get that ahead of time, especially if it's follow-ups, because we have to say something by October, right, with them. So does that help?
Yep, absolutely.
Does anybody else have any questions procedurally?
Just a quick procedural question, in terms of the sponsorship from the town department, for example, is that something we are looking for as part of this eligibility application or as a follow-up to this as part of the actual project application? When are we expected to see that? And if it is something that we would like to see as part of this eligibility application, are the town departments committed to kind of making that commitment this early in the project? And if they are committed, then they are almost kind of steering the project in one way, so other projects may or may not be eligible for that funding. We'll certainly be looking more favorably if town department sponsors a project, definitely. So just want to get some feel from the board.
Right. Well, the only reason why we're talking about town departments is in the scenario where it's town-owned land. So that's the first thing. And in terms of those departments, we do not require that there's a co-sponsorship sign-off right now at this time for eligibility, but certainly by the time of the application submission, they have to have that, and else they're not able to move forward. So, and that's that November 17th timeframe to sign off on that. So, if they already had established with a communication with that group and there was sign off, great, you're ahead of the game. If it hasn't happened yet and it's still early on, okay, we want to call out saying, yes, please keep going because you need to have the conversation with them. And I think in this scenario with the Arrowwood playground, I won't talk about the second one yet, just Arrowwood and number 11, which was the assessment of all of them. I think the opportunities for those parties is to say, hey, should I withdraw or should I move forward with this, or can we support both, right? But is that help?
Yeah.
Kathy, you had a question?
Mine's not procedure, though. It's about this specific.
Okay, any other procedural questions? No, okay.
Just the comments that were in here from the coalition that talks about, what kind of material, it has to be permanently installed. So do we have the answers to those questions from these people? Or have we even asked them?
No, I apologize,
Go for
but
it.
we have not asked them yet, because that meeting only occurred a few
Friday.
days ago. But I think this would be something, at least for sort of that suggestion around looking at your line item budget, that would be the full funding application. But I do think it's important to communicate that to the applicants as part of this eligibility, if we're able to just even provide hey, just so you're aware, these things may not be able to be funded. So I think that's doable with this group.
Right. I mean, as soon as you can see, the application is going from an assessment cost to a full cost. And so it's not like they have a punch list saying it's going to be these 3 swings, it's going to be this slide.
Well, they have an equipment price of $68,000, so they must have that. just
A quote from
haven't
a manufacturer, right? But I think ultimately it's still a town land. It still needs to go out to bids, et cetera, right? So it needs to keep going a little further than this. It wouldn't be based on that specifically. So saying in the spirit wise, is CPA allowed to be CPA funds allowed to rehabilitate this playground? It's an existing playground. Can CPA fund capital improvement on that space? Technically, it can, right? And is there anything else in this form that that jumps out to us saying, is it eligible or not eligible? Deborah?
I was thinking that I feel like we've got a commitment to, when we determine eligible or not, to give comment to each of the applicants, whether it's something helpful like reminding them of those notes from the coalition that Kathy mentioned, that remember when you're putting this together, we can't pay for things like mulch. So make sure your application addresses that. Where else will you get the funds for that? Because today, this, I think, is about, is this sort of project eligible or not? And then we'll figure out what tips to give them or the questions to lead them with. But just the general, keep going, tell us more, or no, we don't do that. But we should also tell them why.
Right. Thank you.
So I think the option 2 looks like a more the response one, like this, because the estimate looks a wide, it's a broad estimate of the cost, little concerning there. So maybe one of the feedback would be project seems to be an eligible one when and if you provide a second quote, competing quote, and get much more narrow and also support from the town departments to see whether they are willing to co-sponsor it and then take the responsibility afterwards to maintain it. Otherwise, I think it's like a good starting point for the CPA funds.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just a quick one. Just for purposes of tonight's discussion then, on all these proposals, is it my understanding correct that it's really the budgeted amount really isn't important tonight as opposed to whether funds are able to be allocated? The amount isn't really necessary that we worry about that, is it? I mean, because when they bring the proposal forward, that could change anyway. So we're just looking at strictly eligibility and whether funds can be appropriated for that purpose, not necessarily the amount.
I mean, the amount is always important, but I think, given that the first glance at this and saying, adding all these things together, the sum of all these projects doesn't exceed what's in the bank, right? So it's not like, oh, okay, you're looking for $2 million and we don't have that.
Right, but
you're dead in the water, right?
By granting eligibility, we're not granting a specific amount of
No.
funding.
No,
I just want to make that clear to people, that it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get that money that's on their proposal.
correct, yeah.
Okay.
And many applicants did ask, how final did this budget have to be? And I did inform them that at this time, it is, we understand it'll be slightly flexible, and I asked that, or we do ask that it'll be finalized by the full funding application.
Also, if I may,
Yep. Go
may I
ahead,
add?
sorry, no good.
And also because the one other consideration is it looks like the timeline is 24 plus months. So we don't need to release the entire funding if we have to, right? Maybe half of it after initial milestone, maybe that goes into the next year's budget, the remaining amount. Is that how we look these applications? Because based on the
Yeah.
timeline and split them up into this year's funding budget and then next year's budget, whatever it is.
I see what you're saying. Well, just to be clear, so definitely, we are only, when we get to the point where we're allocating, that's only a one-year approval.
Right.
Right? We cannot commit the town to approve monies for the following years. So it is based on that one-year allocation. There could be milestones attached to payments for that one-year allocation, but not necessarily approval to, say, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4.
Right.
So these phases are standalone and their approvals. Yep.
So Jason, one other question, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
This may not even pertain to Arrowwood, it may just in general. So to Gail's point about budgets and what's estimates, are we, or do we have to, if we approve a project, do we have to fully fund it? Can we say, well, yes, the project's approved, but, given whatever circumstances, the monies that we would be recommending to town meeting to vote on would be X as opposed to Y?
Yes. And that wouldn't be tonight, though. That wouldn't,
Agreed.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
understand.
but when we get into
that point.
November, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. We can go lower. And so can town meeting.
Right,
Yes.
exactly, yeah.
So can town meeting. Okay. All right, any other questions relative to the eligibility for this? I mean, again, it's totally fine. We should have conversation because it's our very first project that we're reviewing, right, for eligibility. Last call, eligibility, okay. Now, you're the closest, Rajesh, to saying you had a motion, sound like you had a motion getting ready, okay? So I want to encourage you to complete the thought and to throw an option on the table. But if you have any questions about formulating that motion, now's a good time to do that.
The motion to make a motion.
Well, you were leading here with an option too, and I think that I have some questions too. I think so. Rowan, let me ask Rowan then in this case, right? Certainly we definitely been hearing that we want to have a Parks and Rec to say that they will be co-sponsoring, so that co-sponsorship has to be in place before it goes forward. The applicant needs to understand that what is allowable, right? That capital, as you read now. And number 3 is that there's an opportunity here for collaborating. Should they move forward with this with Parks and Recreation? Rephrasing. Those entities should consider whether to wait for the full assessment across all the playgrounds. But that's to be determined between those two parties, right? Again, we have an applicant who has an interest, but we have the department that has the capability of making this happen. So, I think there's, it doesn't preclude the applicant from continuing to be a spokesperson to advocate for their local playground to move forward in any kind of proposal moving, thereafter. Okay.
Motion? No, I'll make a motion that the proposed eligibility project entitled what else to change?
Arrowwood.
Arrowwood Park, thank you guys, will be eligible for CPA funding if the applicant is granted to determine,
Those are just stock points, may not be applicable for everything.
right, okay, yeah, that's true. If the first one doesn't apply in this case, so applicant confirms that Parks and Rec department will be providing co-sponsorship, and then applicant indicate
And 1B3.
that doesn't apply here either, and then we'll go for the applicant understand that there will be grant agreement inclusive
So
retirement commitment.
2-2.
the way I heard the motion may be more or less number 2 with the 3 kind of, we call them conditions of eligibility, of opportunity to collaborate with Parks and Rec study, to collaborate or to receive co-sponsorship from the Parks and Rec department, and to remind the applicant of the limitations of CPA funding in regards to capital improvements.
Yep.
Okay.
Point 3 and 2 and 4. Yep.
So
Not 4,
Make
because 4
motion
not
of
4 is not applicable in this case.
On CPA regulation.
Yeah, it's really a special case of the Affordable Housing Trust, when we get to that point.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do it again.
You could read number 2 and then make a motion as perhaps.
Okay, I make a motion that. Sorry, yeah. The applicant confirms that the Parks and Recreation Department will provide co-sponsorship before the full funding application is due. So,
In addition to
in addition to the,
points, just maybe the points that we just listed.
yeah, in addition to the feedback provided by the committee in the application, in the response letter.
Is that clean? Is that clean? We good? Legal?
Understood.
I'm good with it. I'm good with it. I'm good with
Just
it.
need a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, all those in favor of the stated motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And actually, we
Do we
need
have
to
to
take
roll
roll
call?
call because
Yeah, we have to roll call.
remote. Okay, sorry about that, folks.
Sorry.
Again, I said it was bumpy. I said it was bumpy. Okay, give me 1 second. Get my cheat sheet. Okay. All right, Rajesh?
Approve.
Approve. Okay. Deborah?
Aye.
Approve. Okay. Melanie?
Yes.
Approve. Okay. Martha?
Aye.
Approve. Gail?
Aye.
Approve. Perna?
Aye.
Approve. Jim?
Aye.
Okay. Kathy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay, so we have majority approval, so the motion carries. Okay, moving on to the next proposal.
And
Got the first one done?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just to reiterate, logistically, what this will look like is I will put this into a written letter form with the statements as made in the motion, and send them to the applicant, okay?
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, next one here is number 2, Traily Lane Playground.
May I also jump in, unless you have an additional point, I'd like to provide some background.
Please do.
Okay. So this is also a application from a resident regarding an idea for a park at Traily Lane. This is a open space currently, and she did reach out to me asking to be put in contact with the Parks and Rec department. We have not had that meeting yet, though, as the timing was just a little bit too close to the application deadline, and we haven't gotten it on the books yet. But I will say and share that in my my very preliminary outreach to Parks and Rec regarding this project, they did have some sort of concerns or some, they want some time to look into this parcel of land to establish what kind of restrictions are on it, as there may be some recreation restrictions on the land. So at this time, I think it would be my recommendation to maybe, and this is simply a recommendation, to potentially look at option 3 of the draft motions, following any conversation with the board or the committee tonight, to potentially request that we get some more feedback from Parks and Rec to understand the feasibility of this project for both the sake of the applicant and the department, to make sure that we're facilitating the conversation as needed.
Can you talk about the restriction? I mean, is this whether it's is this conservation land or is it?
And I don't want to throw Jim under the bus. I don't know if you have any familiarity with this parcel. Okay.
No, do not.
It may be that Parks and Rec, Parks and Cemetery Commission, at the time they accepted the parcel, may have restricted it as passive recreation, and I would likely want to connect with you to understand,
Sure, yeah.
maybe if you wanted to help look into that.
Absolutely. Yep.
That would be the restriction, and if it was passive, my understanding would be that a playground would not be possible.
Correct.
But again, this is just preliminary, this is just early fact-finding that I wanted to make the committee aware of in review of this eligibility form.
Okay. Yeah.
A question for Rowan. Would that explain possibly why it was not included on the parks in proposal 11?
There's no
Because I
existing
question that.
park there,
Oh, okay.
and my understanding is that playground
Okay.
assessment is only for existing
Okay.
parks.
It is.
Thanks.
That's my understanding as well, too, yes. Yep.
So this request is for a creation of a brand-new park in an area part of town that doesn't have a park nearby.
Right.
So that makes sense from a CPA eligibility perspective. Can you create a park on recreation land? Yes. However, is this parcel being owned by the town have a restriction that prevents that from happening? So that's the part of the eligibility that is also kind of, we need to know whether it's even allowed. Kathy?
It's zoned rural A. Does that clear anything up or no?
Not for me, it
Okay.
doesn't.
Would it-
But,
Okay.
I can find out, like Ron said, when we accepted the land, and I don't know when that was, it may have been 20 years ago, it may have been 2 days ago, I don't know, right? But when we accepted the land, there is deemed classifications of land that is accepted. So I would just need to find out what that was at the time that the land was accepted.
Would that be in the deed for the property, or would that be in some sort of town?
Great question, I don't know the answer to that, Kathy.
But I think it would be, because we have this meeting and next meeting, we've built in some time to review questions like this that come up, so we have a whole month.
Yep.
Not quite a full month, but we can certainly, and I'll take the lead on trying to get that question answered.
Yeah, and so, just a procedural question on that, would the expectation be that there'd be a formal response? It wouldn't be simply, yeah, I checked with Joe and Joe said yes, it would actually be, you would need something, document that said, hey, communication happened with Angela Snell, this is what was in the document when the land was accepted, this is the, what it can be used for.
That would be ideal, wouldn't it? I think we can do our best. But I think in general, right, for something like this, it's going to be the CPA's responsibility to just kind of balance all of these departmental restrictions. And as your staff liaison, I'll try to work with staff to get us those answers. But yeah, I mean, I think as we've just decided in the previous one, a playground itself is eligible, but it may not be worth making that determination yet
Right.
if the land itself, if the project, we could say, isn't feasible.
Right, because of the
So-
restrictions.
On that parcel, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So basically, option 3 is not saying that we're going to move forward with it, saying it's eligible. We're just saying that we're instructing that planning economic department, development staff to, keep fact-finding on this until we make a determination at the October meeting. And so that, that could lead us to a conservation agent conversation, or going with the assessor's department, or digging up, going to the town clerk, looking for any records. So that's some, it has to keep going from this point.
Chairman, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Not just this project, but there are other projects too that didn't have comments from coalition. How do we take that they don't have comments, or I don't know how to read that part, like some of these projects don't have comments from the coalition.
Oh, okay. When we get there, I can certainly fill in that gap of if they didn't provide, because it would have been similar comments. It could have been general comments that we've had when we talked I talked, and Rowan talked, and Melanie talked with the coalition. The officers talked to the coalition on Friday. So
There's a there's a easement for sewer and water going through here too. This property, not that, so it may not be possible to put something on it.
And right, that's part of the, that's part of that fact finding. So, all right, well, I appreciate that. Is there anything else to comment here? I think, it sounds pretty clear in my mind, unless there's something different in your all opinion, that we need more detail about that land.
I'm looking at your comment on this as well about the potential encroachment issue, and I come to the same conclusion. There's a mismatch between the satellite imagery and what seems to be in GIS. So I think in addition to whatever restrictions are on the land, I think determination of the property boundaries would also be in order.
Right, because that could be problematic if, you're saying it's town end, but, there's an established encroachment that may be a legal problem issue as well. So that's, thank you for that call out.
If you don't mind me saying, it might be a fine line, because this is just the eligibility. We can certainly look into it. I think we'll have to see, we don't want to do all the work for the applicant either, though. We want to make sure that if we do get the final funding, then we do all the vetting and make sure that we're, doing our sufficient research. But at the eligibility stage, as a committee, we'll have to kind of figure out where the boundary is between how much due diligence do we do now versus later. And I don't know the answer.
I think it's still worth to bring up, whether it's to Kevin or council, to say, if there was an encroachment on any parcel that we have a capital improvement on, does that need to be rectified first?
Right. Which is probably yes, right? But yeah, we can start that conversation at least. I'm not sure if it'll be answered by the 3rd.
Right, and that's what the timing issue is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just to say,
Deborah?
I was thinking on this one, in the interest of time, the biggest question right now is it, was it accepted for passive recreation or not? Maybe we table determining the eligibility of this one until we get that quick answer. Because if it's impossible to do because it was accepted for passive recreation, then we'll save them time and us time as well.
Right. So
Yeah.
So I mean, that's where Rowan's leading on that. So, all right. Any other discussion, or are we ready for a motion?
I can do this one if you want.
Thank you, please.
So I'd like to make a motion to ask the Planning and Economic Development staff to request a comment from the Parks and Rec Department in order for CPC to make a recommendation for the feasibility of the, is it Traily?
Traily Lane
Traily
Playground.
Lane Park.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Kathy, second. All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. I will call you in your. I will say. caught myself there. I will ask you that question. So, Rajesh,
Aye.
approve. Okay. Deborah.
Aye.
Okay. Melanie,
Aye.
approving it. Okay. Martha.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Gail.
Aye.
Okay. Approve. Perna.
Aye.
Okay. Jim.
Aye.
Approve. Yep. Okay. Kathy.
Aye.
All right, and myself, aye. Okay, motion carries. All right, moving on to the next. Rowan, would you please give us any background on number 3?
Yeah.
1830 brick schoolhouse HVAC heat pumps.
I have, because this is on town land with the Historic Society who's leasing this property. They'll be co-sponsoring with Public Buildings. I do not believe we have that co-sponsor yet, but my understanding is that Keith Baldinger is working closely with the Historic Society, and that should be forthcoming shortly. I can also summarize the coalition's comments as well. Maybe that would be
Please.
helpful.
Yes.
So they confirmed that this HVAC heat pump system is a valid use of CPA funds, as long as the building itself is what is considered the historic asset. It is not necessarily about the documents that's contained inside of it, and protecting those. It's going to be the historic restoration or rehabilitation of a historic building, which is the 1830 schoolhouse. Okay.
There is also a requirement, any rehabilitation for a historic property has to fall in line with the Department of Interior guidelines for rehabilitation. That's certainly available online. You can, if anybody, any applicant who wants to look at that forward, they can go to the coalition's website and go to historic preservation and see and follow links there for that part of it. So that will definitely be something that would be part of the the scope of work conditions if this project were to move forward.
I'm sorry, may I add one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
I want to apologize, I got it confused. I'll restate, it's actually the project applicant is Selco, and the building is owned by the Public Buildings Department, so my apologies. So in fact, they will not need a co-sponsor request because it is all department-led, okay?
But certainly, there's also an interest here by Shrewsbury Historical Society, because they're currently the tenant who's there, and they are also stewards of a lot of documents and artifacts from Shrewsbury. To be determined if it's historic, but that's the applicant was honing in on the artifacts and documents within the building. However, because those items haven't been, that is not what is going to be worked on, right? From the CPA money perspective, it's the building that will receive the HVAC system, right? So we're not talking about a vault of material and protecting what's in the vault. We're talking about the building itself being HVAC protected, right, from further harm there. So I have all the questions, but I want to reserve that to hearing from others, especially Gail, right, from a historic perspective. If you have any other questions.
Well, no, my comment was that the same thing with the Secretary of the Interior, the guidelines that they have to follow in making sure that the representative, whoever is overseeing that project, is designated responsible for it, or that they've provided the proper instruction or whatever, that's part of the warrant article as well, that whoever was overseeing this restoration is the person responsible. If it's a staff member from the town or if it's an outside source, I think that's important that be part of the whole package. So, but as far as historical, there's no question that building is a historical resource, and so, if they separate the two entities, I think they have to rewrite this so that it reads that they're restoring the facility, as opposed to the purpose of the restoration is to preserve the artifacts inside. It will happen anyway just by protecting it, but there's some major issues in that building that need to be addressed besides just the HVAC. So they may need to take a look at some of the other aspects, but from my understanding, Selco approached the society. It was not initiated by the society to do this project, although they're willing to partner and however they have to. So I don't know what you need from the Historical Commission, because it's already in the registry, so it doesn't need a historical designation. It's already designated historical.
And can you remind the committee, is it a national, is it local? What's the designation?
Well, I know it's state. It's on the state registry.
Okay.
I don't remember if it's on. To be honest with you, I don't remember if it's on the national registry.
Okay.
I know the
and
number
certainly
5
that's-
is, but I'm not sure if that one is. I think it may be, but I don't want to speak out of.
Okay, but you're saying at least it's on the state.
Yeah, it's on the state.
Okay. Anybody else?
My only comment is that maybe it's before we commit to the full funding, whether, what Gail was mentioning, whether it's feasible, whether fix the issue by having the HVAC or heat pumps installed. Maybe a feasible study would help.
So let's see here. Is this already, if he's focusing on feasibility? We've had a few of these now. So installation of high. Okay. All right. So yeah, it is. So focusing on the installation of the HVAC. Okay, Select would manage, oversee the project with the Historical Society as a partner. Center, okay. Okay. Yeah, this is not feasibility. This is,
It's a full funding.
it's straight to installation.
Right.
All right, well, one of the concerns, all right, I'll say what concerns I have is that, yes?
Sorry, before you go to your concerns, just
Yeah.
clarification, is this installation or is it repair?
Installation.
Installation.
You mean
Installation.
So there is no existing HVAC today?
Correct.
Sounds like it's
okay.
not,
Correct.
I don't know.
Mostly like it looks like it's a heat pumps rather than.
Yeah.
So
And then you said it is part of the registry today, because it's not checked off on the form that it is part of anything. It just, that's left blank on the form, at least that I can
Right.
see on my phone.
Oh, it's,
So I wasn't sure.
Well,
it is checked.
It's checked.
Okay,
It's all
it's checked.
set.
Yes,
Okay.
on screen there, okay, yeah, it's hard to read from there, but
Yeah.
it is, the first,
That's
the
okay.
first box is the important one. Is it already on the historic district, or listed on the State Register of Historic Places? The answer is yes.
Okay, got it.
Gail has confirmed that. So the next one didn't have to be filled
Right.
out.
Got it, okay, thank you.
And as a capital improvement on a town-owned building, it would be eligible anyway, right? As a capital improvement to a town-owned building?
It is a capital
Even though they
improvement.
lease it?
And the intention here is for the, preservation of that building
Right.
from further deterioration by, HVAC installation. Any other questions, comments before I get to my comments?
Sorry.
Can I hear from Deborah? Okay. All right. So certainly, I think that I think we've really established that the eligibility form should be rewritten, focusing on the building, right? Because it's currently worded focusing on the documents, artifacts, is also bringing up the part about educational opportunities, and
Right.
that's not really the scope of the conversation, right? What I would also ask is that I think the applicant should consider, how does this HVAC system going to mitigate the building? Because if we're talking about first floor, second floor, and the problem so far, as I hear it, is water infiltration to the basement. You're competing with nature, right? So if you haven't remedied the basement, how are you going to protect the next stories, right? It could be off or not, right? So I think that's a consideration. I feel that's a consideration, because this may be an investment that doesn't do anything, right? You're competing against nature, right?
So is that something we want to put in as a condition of eligibility, or is that something that we hold and discuss with them if they're invited for the full funding application? Because I don't know if that's a critical flaw in their application, right? But I think it's kind of a gray area.
It is a great, but again, just speaking for myself, right? Just speaking for myself, I know that if we were looking at this in November, I'd have that question, and I could not, move forward with that, thinking that this is going to be addressing a problem that it's not, right?
I agree with that. I think that if they address the issue now, they would have a better chance of the project moving forward with funding if it was a total package of the building.
Right.
If all three floors, basement, first floor, and second floor.
Before I get to Deborah's, there's also another consideration here too that the coalition did express to us when it comes to historic buildings and remediation. So any remediation, if the building is already not up to code, especially ADA code, and this kind of work, is this substantial enough to raise to the level of having to have the ADA compliance as well? It is another item here, right?
Yeah,
So that's
no, right.
it's kind of thinking about that. So I think there's a connection to that project as well.
So just a clarification, does the
Yeah.
code applies to there are different specifications for the historic buildings, right, rather than regular code?
I don't think we have, I don't think we have expertise as the committee to know that, but we could do that fact-finding
Right.
with the full funding application.
Right. Deborah?
I was just simply going to agree that it's a good question to ask. I don't know that asking them to address the water is to determine determining factor in whether or not the project would be eligible to move forward. But I do agree that that should be one of the comments that we give them with the determination that if you're moving forward to submit a full application, we'd like you to expand on that. Tell us more about what you're doing with that, or certainly we could ask them that in a hearing as well.
Right, and I think I believe it's an important question because the checkbox we're trying to fill here is preserving historic asset, right? So if the work that you're asking for, in my mind, doesn't preserve it all the way, then what are we doing, right? So I think it's important, and I think it's a positive thing. Right? I think it's a positive thing. I'd say, hey, go look at it holistically, right?
I think that question determines whether or not we would recommend funding if it's a full funding, but the answer to that question doesn't determine whether or not the project's eligible to submit a full application.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Comment, you mentioned ADA,
Yes.
so outside of this scope, but I would think any project that's going to change or alter or whatever a physical structure, or even a playground for that matter, right? The assumption has to be that it has to be ADA compliant, right? I would assume that that's
Yes.
for all projects, right? Not just necessarily this one, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think there's already built in that if we were talking about a playground redo, do-over, it's already going to have to comply to that aspect of it.
When you mentioned it for this one, we hadn't talked about it before. I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on what the expectation is for all of these projects.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Last call. Any other comments before taking a motion?
I would like to clarify.
Yes.
And maybe the motion will make clear on this, but can we make the motion to clarify whether are we going to have them resubmit an eligibility form, or are we informing them that it's eligible, but that during the full funding application, please identify it as such rather than the way they have. What's the preference on that?
Well,
Do you want
I think to
record
Deborah's point
keeping, or-
to Deborah's point, it's about, is this eligible? Preserving a historic asset is eligible. And I think that that's an opportunity to take into the full application side, having, revised the description, and then obviously commenting on how they holistically see it. Yes.
So obviously that can change the scope of the project and the funding amounts too, because it does expand or include more aspects of the project. So we keep that in mind.
Right. Okay.
Contingency.
So, Deborah, would you like to make the motion?
I don't have the cheat sheet in front of me. I don't have that. I've got two devices going, trying to read the notes
Okay.
along.
Okay. No problem.
And I would move that we determine that this project that the HVAC for the 1830 Schoolhouse project be invited to apply for full funding with comments and suggestions about further information we'd like to see in their application.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Good. All right. We have a second?
Second.
Okay, Gail seconded. All right. We're going to go take a roll call vote on that. So we'll start with Rajesh.
Aye.
Approve. Okay, Deborah.
Aye.
Melanie.
Aye.
Martha.
Aye.
Gail.
Aye.
Perina.
Aye.
Jim.
I
Kathy.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion carries. Okay, next, Affordable Housing Trust. Rowan, would you like to?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so the Affordable Housing Trust has requested 10%, the 10% allocated for housing, affordable housing construction, et cetera, for our, in an eligibility form, I should say. And I will say that the Planning Department also manages the Affordable Housing Trust. And in running it running this eligibility form over with the coalition, they provided feedback that yes, this type of request can be eligible. However, they would advise against it in general, and that would be, and again, those on the call can certainly provide further information, but in general, that they advise against this generally because they find that it sits in this trust, these affordable housing trusts, and that the CPC won't have control over how the funds are spent. Now, I think as staff, I'll also kind of pose the question of, as the CPC, how do you envision working with the Affordable Housing Trust to further this goal of creation of affordable housing, and thinking about how do you want your two roles to connect, because of course the trust has money as well, independent of the CPC, and I think in reviewing this for eligibility, we could do two things. We could say, yes, it's eligible, but maybe we as a committee have decided so-and-so we don't want to move forward in this way, or we could say it's eligible and then continue a conversation with the Affordable Housing Trust, maybe at their next meeting even, if we wanted to send a representative to discuss sort of a strategy. So that's just my proposal.
Yeah, I think I agree with the coalition, because if without a specific project need and a budget, if we are started giving to trusts, it sets a bad precedent for every trust to come ahead and say, oh, I want that reserve. It looks little incomplete in itself. If they have a specific project they want to co-sponsor or co-fund the project, then CPC can really support them rather than just giving them the reserves into their trust.
May I make a comment there?
Yeah.
I believe I heard Stuart from the coalition say that if we sent the money over to the Affordable Housing Trust, then something might come up on our side that, for instance, a piece of open land might become available and we might not have the funds. Now, on the other hand, if it goes over to the Affordable Housing Trust and something comes up that they want to buy immediately and it's, they could use the money, then they've got it. So I think it's 50-50 there. It's just we're balancing off who's likely to have a good break there. And probably neither one is ever going to happen. So.
Yeah. Well, I can hold my comment as well if other members want to say.
Well, my concern was if we give up the funding to them and lose the control of it, that it kind of takes that money out of the natural progression where town meeting has to vote on it, and we're responsible for those funds, and it's our responsibility to bring it forth to town meeting to approve or disapprove, and we kind of take that out of the picture if we just give them the money. If there was an issue where they needed the money right away, we could fast track something and turn the money over to them, at a special town meeting or whatever, if it was that important. So I kind of go along with the coalition's idea that it may not be the best idea, just because we don't have that.
Yep.
The town doesn't have the control. The residents and the town meeting members don't have control over that money anymore. It's gone. It's like we gave it away.
Well, there's a clarifying point.
Okay.
There actually is a way to say, hey, there's condition on this money, so there is a grant agreement that can be applied to this, and
Oh,
that's
okay.
where we got the.
Yeah, now that's what I was going to say. There should be a grant agreement between our two organizations that they will use the money always that they get from us, which has to be kept separately from their regular money, in accordance with CPC rules. So under the Community Preservation Act. So, but that they're just starting to think about that, about having a grant agreement, and there is a sample grant agreement that's in existence the coalition provides, but nobody's saying that we're going to adopt that.
So if we gave them that 10% now, that would have to be approved by town meeting in that process.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
then
so-
if they had a project, would they have to bring that project to town meeting? No.
No.
Okay.
No, but it would fall if they execute this grant agreement with us, I guess we both have to sign it, right? CPC and,
Mine is,
Board of
yeah,
Health,
yeah,
I believe.
yeah.
It makes sense, right? That, this is way down the line. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna take time to get that started, and,
But under CPA guidelines, it is eligible
It
to
is.
do that.
It is
Okay, so
eligible,
we have
yes.
a-
It is an allowable use, and I think that's what
Okay.
we're going to be leading here in the conversation, which is, it is an allowable use. And often we do that through a grant agreement from the CPC to the AHT about how this money has to be spent. I mean, if you don't have a grant agreement, you're still,
So
you still,
so we really
they're
don't
still
have a-
subject to CPC rules about how the money is spent. That's just legislation. However, the grant agreement would stipulate anything other conditions like timing. Like, you must use the monies within X amount of time, right? It can't just sit in the account for the next 20 years and do nothing with it, right? As an example, right? So tonight, it's about, is this eligible?
Yeah, so,
On paper, it is eligible.
yep.
Whether, you move forward with that. I mean, obviously, Rowan sees both sides, AHA, both committees, so like, you
Yeah.
I know.
could just talk yourself.
I won't, I know. I think, just to say a few words, I guess, is that while this Affordable Housing Trust is new, they will have a more specialized understanding and knowledge of affordable housing production than us as CPC members may be able to achieve. So that may be something as well, is that they might have, and they have other funds that could provide a larger impact to our CPA funds to actually create affordable housing or create programs for rental assistance or just things like that. So, I think that's also a side of it too, is that they have an expertise.
But one.
Not to.
Patty.
I think for a lot of the reasons that were stated tonight, there's the loss of control. There's also loss of tracking. The Affordable Trust isn't going to track it the way the CPC is going to track it. And I think I would much rather have them come with a specific project. We've identified this piece of land, it's going to cost X, we'd like approval, rather than just a blanket, we want your 10%. And that's just my
Yeah, Kathy,
opinion.
that's where I was gonna go. Like, I heard you say, Jason, is that it meets the eligibility requirements, but to me, I don't know if we can stipulate that, that we want this, right? You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know if the eligibility check, okay, it works, yep, good. Can we at the same time say, oh, no, by the way, we would like you to understand, da-da-da-da-da, like that? I don't know if that's part of this process, or if that's part of the go-forward part with the next meeting.
I would recommend that it's part of this process so that they're not blindsided if they fill out the full funding and then
Right.
we say no, I
Ever?
might recommend, last thing I'll say is I might recommend meeting with them if we did want to request attending one of their meetings to discuss further, just to kind of keep the conversation intact. Otherwise, we can draft a sort of, I can try to synthesize your comments here, but it might be helpful to have a representative speak to them as well.
Let's take Deborah's comment.
Kathy said exactly what I was thinking. It may technically be eligible, but especially now in our very first year, it's not a project. And everything that we've worked on and written, we've said we're looking for projects. So, if it's technically eligible, but we wouldn't be supporting it later, I would almost rather say not eligible at this time.
Can I just add one question? So because we have the provision in the application, right? They would come for the in the CPA booklet, we have this provision where there is a need. If there is a need, we can speed up the fast track the application, and then we can review those as a special circumstance applications, right? So yeah, if they have a project, they can always come up with a specific project, and this is what we are willing to put in, and we need CPA grants. Otherwise, taking it a blanket thing and putting into trust and waiting for it looks little.
And I think it's the same, it goes in line with what Gail was saying too, right? That there is they can have a special town meeting if there was a case. I'm
Well, it is
gonna-
still eligible.
I mean, honestly, we don't have to all agree, right? That's, it's 9 members, right? And it says we don't have to all agree. I see it as, it is an eligible thing. We started, as we going through these applications so far, we've said, this is eligible, this is not eligible, or this is eligible now, but you really have to come back with more facts. So I'm of the mindset this is an eligible thing. But I'm leaning towards a no later on, right? Because I would rather see an application. So, but I will take any motion, right? To if you want to put something on the table and take the vote on it to move on, because it's an eligibility check.
If I may add, to that point, technical aspect, whether it's application is eligible or not, I think that fits in, right? Okay, this is eligible, but is it? Does it serve the purpose in the long process of CPA? Maybe not. So maybe we can put in the questions asking for those extra clarifications of points, what kind of projects, what's the timeline on all those things to be eligible for the next round before they are put in the full application.
Okay. Well, I mean, if it was worded as such that it was while it is an eligible use of CPA monies to give monies to an affordable housing trust, and that would come along with a grant agreement and a time commitment by CPA regulations. However, the committee feels that it would be more appropriate to submit a project that had a specified project or need,
Exactly.
rather than shifting balances, right? Rather than putting monies into the account for an undetermined use.
Could we just ask them to resubmit with a project? I know, the language is really good. I like what you said, Jason, but can we just say to them, please resubmit with a project?
We could.
You could ask, would you consider?
Would you consider resubmitting? Yeah.
And I will say it again, if we want, we could also, and I don't mean to push this, but if you wanted to designate someone to attend a meeting to speak on behalf of the CPC regarding sort of this, we could also do it that way if it felt like you wanted to have more of a conversation with.
We tried to do that, and we didn't get a response from them.
I think we try to have a three committee, meeting.
I'll admit that may have just been a miscommunication.
Okay.
I don't think that might have been just a misunderstanding.
Okay.
But we can follow up.
Are we complicating this?
Yeah.
I think, it's just, we're just voting on eligibility tonight, so it is eligible. So that's, if they want to bring forth a project or a proposal, that's they can do that. If we go to option 1 and say that it's eligible, and if they want to bring forth a proposal, then funding proposal, then that's their prerogative. I think we're getting into the weeds a little bit here, and I don't know if it's necessary tonight.
Yeah, I just agree with Rowan with, if we say it's eligible.
It's eligible.
It kind of gives the impression that we're going to move forward, right? And I think we should at least couch it a little bit and say, yes, it's eligible, but we need something concrete. We need a project to be tied to this.
Totally.
I think Deborah has a
that
motion
sounds-
she wants to throw on the table. Deborah?
What I was going to suggest is that we tell them that it's eligible, but that the commission is reluctant to approve requests of this form. My worry is if we ask them to resubmit with a project, that's like saying our deadlines didn't matter. That we'd love to see, or perhaps we say we'd love to see a concrete project from you in the future. But at this time, this is technically eligible, but the committee does feel that they'd prefer to see a project in the future. Because I don't think it's fair to folks who didn't make the deadline that we basically give them an extension to go back and do their homework all over again. But we could say technically eligible, but not currently looked upon favorably. Something like that.
I believe the disadvantage that the Housing Trust has right now is that they're new and there's no track record about where they're going to go next. but that's their, they're working towards that. So I think that for me personally, if I saw where their plans are when they get that in motion and they start getting, like some traction, that it would make sense. Like, oh, if you have a record of making this happen, I can certainly, say, my mind, grant agreement goes to you, CPA, this is how you're going to use it. Great, move on, right? Because you're going to execute on it. All right, we have to make a motion. We have to move on from this. So I think what I'm hearing is that it is eligible. There's concern about that. There's an opportunity for conversation. Deborah pointing out that's giving an unfair advantage to the conversation. We do have up to October for make a determination. So that's it. So I don't think we're really extending. I think we're just going to October with this if we don't do anything tonight with this one.
Okay.
Somebody make a motion, please. I don't think I can make a motion.
So I'll make a motion that we, for the Affordable Housing Trust eligibility form, we accept it as technically eligible with the stipulation that the affordable housing, whoever submitted it, needs to come up with a concrete project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of that motion, we'll go down the line. Rajesh?
Aye.
What was that? Is that an aye? You approve it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well,
Technically.
Can we have some discussion on the
Well-
motion?
were you doing that on my behalf or yours?
I think both.
Okay.
I know we want to move on, but I want to make sure that as staff, I can instruct the AHT about how to proceed. And I based on our conversation, I want to make sure that I'm understanding. So we're asking them to submit a new project. Now, in the motion we just made. So if that's the case, then we'll allow them to resubmit by the 3rd for a new project, or we say, your project is eligible, but please consider revising your application for the full funding round to identify a project. Like, would we ask for a revision at the time of the full funding application?
For me, as the person that submitted it,
Yes.
I would say no.
Okay.
I would say we would want to see it prior to that. I think before we go in front of a discussion on full funding, we would want to see something that's tangible and not at the time of full funding, if that makes sense.
I mean, yeah.
Does,
I guess
does,
it's your
does
committee.
does that violate what Deborah was bringing up, the point about extending the deadline for a special group?
Yeah, so I heard what Deb said, and I know that she's got her hand up too, so I understand that she wants to comment, and I don't want to speak for Deb. But I also think that we've done that now with the previous one, where we said, hey, listen, you came out with a proposal for an HVAC system. We said yes, but make you aware of the fact that you need to look at this from a complete feasibility point of view, and that maybe it's going to have to be modified based on that discussion, right? That's kind of what we did.
At the full funding round was my understanding of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one's slightly different in that
Yeah.
there's nothing tangible. There's nothing I can sink my teeth into. It's just, hey, give me X number of dollars and move it over here.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's under the table. It doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like the spirit of CPC to me.
Well, we are saving that money in our separate affordable housing account, and it's waiting for them.
Yep.
It's an option. We have to give Deborah an option.
Yeah. She does have her hand.
Choice.
Or she did.
Deborah?
If we continue with the motion as has been stated, I will vote no, simply because it's one thing to ask for elaboration or to remind an applicant to include something in their final application. In this case, we're asking them to hurry up, go find an actual project. And I think that's different, where it's to ask someone to elaborate, I think is within the spirit of what our process we're trying to move forward. But to go from, like you said, give us the money and it's nebulous. It's not for a concrete project. So I would not be in favor of asking them to go redo all of this and come up with a concrete project at this time. That I would tell them we'd like to see a concrete project in the future. But in this case, because they didn't, it'll have to be next time.
Okay, well, any other comments? Because we have to resume unless you want to withdraw. If Jim is keeping with his motion, we have to continue the motion. All right, Deborah?
And no,
No. Okay, Melanie?
Yes.
So approve. Okay. Martha?
No.
No. Gail?
No.
Okay, Perna?
Aye.
Approve. Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
No. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 noes, 5 yeses. The motion carries. Okay. So that's approved. So it is.
I'll go back and listen to the motion you made, write it down,
Yeah.
Yep.
and send it in a letter to the HT. We're comfortable with that?
And I'm happy to be part of that meeting.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing, Rowan. If we need to have a meeting, I'd be more than happy to be part of whatever meeting you wanna set up.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I was thinking about a public hearing, like attending their next
Oh,
meeting, but.
okay, you
But
can do
we
it too.
can't, I mean, we can just set up an internal meeting if you wanted, but we might wanna,
When do they meet?
like, I don't know if it's set. Their next meeting will likely be in October. So after our meeting on the 3rd.
Okay. Certainly, I'm available if it's an officers' conversation,
Okay.
right? And
How about you tell me what, as the committee, you would like me to, how would you like to present it? Would you like to offer a meeting? Would you like to just leave it?
So, me, we're gonna.
We're probably overthinking this, but.
No, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we're gonna submit to them what we just voted
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
I think it'd be inherent upon them to say, hey, I'd like some clarification.
Okay.
Can we meet, right? I don't think we should be the driver of that. I think they should be like, I don't understand what this means. Can you have somebody from the committee come talk to me?
Okay.
That's why I think, and I don't know if we need to vote on that or not, but that's why I think we should approach it.
no, I don't. Yeah, I don't
We
think
don't need to vote, but-
Okay.
Certainly, yeah,
Just want to make sure I'm acting as staff on behalf.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
To understand.
And you're seeing both seats anyway, so
And I'm what?
you're on both seats anyway.
I know,
so
I
you're-
really-
you have inside scoop there. What would say? Anyways, I
Okay.
am open. Kathy, you're the chairperson of the Housing Authority as well. Would you be willing to have a conversation as well if one were to be arranged, if there was a request from
Absolutely.
the Housing
Yep,
Authority?
we tried before to meet,
Okay.
to do that. And
Okay. Okay, cool. All right, great. All right, moving on. Number 5, Town Common Holiday Lighting. Rowan, any
All right.
background?
Yes. I will say we're at 5 out of 13. If we don't want to make it through all of them tonight, we can table some if we want to call at whatever point our last one. The lighting, however, can be fairly quick. We only have a limited comment on it, which is that it is not eligible because it is not a capital improvement. And that is because it's temporary. It's not something, as the coalition put it, not something in the ground, not something that would be harmful to the asset that is town land if it were to be taken out or removed. So for a number of other kind of technical reasons, it's not considered eligible. I would propose to the committee, similar to the conversation we just had, is in the case when it is likely not eligible, do we want to take any action to invite them to revise? Or shall we just say, no, it is not eligible, if that is?
I think
Motion
it's just
made by the board.
just a nice, polite no.
Okay.
When it's not eligible, it's not
I
eligible.
mean, it's a lovely display. I love it every year, but
Yeah,
it's not permanent.
I think the clarifying piece, though, is that if it was, even if it was permanent lighting, it's not a capital asset in that sense, from the
Right.
spirit of what CPA, adding recreation, open space recreation, it's lighting, right?
They might try the cultural council. It's sort of an art installation. You might want to think of it that way.
Sure.
So do we still have to make a motion on it?
Yes.
Okay, so make a motion that,
Number 4.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Was there
Any other comments?
Sorry, I
Comments,
Go
questions?
too fast.
No? Go for it.
Propose that the motion that is proposed as the town common lighting is not eligible for CPA funding on its current proposal,
Period.
period.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all right. All four of those in favor of the motion, we'll go down the line. Rajesh?
Aye.
Okay. Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Verna?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Approved. As stated. Okay, moving on to the next, number 6. and that's parking area for Camp One again. So in disclosure, you want
Yes.
to make your disclosure?
Oh, yes, I
Abstention.
am promoting this, but I will accept whatever the committee has to say, and if you would like further information, I can provide it.
Okay, so basically you would be abstaining from any vote on this one because you're a member of the Trails Committee and you're the proponent.
If you advise, that's what I will do.
Thank
I will
you.
recuse myself from this vote.
Okay. Thank you. Okay,
So, in our conversations with the coalition, this project, I can do my best to sum it up as it was deemed a gray area by Stewart in some senses. And that is, from my understanding, because in general, for the creation of a new recreation facility, parking lots are allowed. But if this project is simply the creation of a parking lot, it's not necessarily in the spirit of a creation of a new recreation space because one already exists there. And now, Jason, feel free to jump in at any point if you feel I'm off base. But essentially, the other issue that may be encountered is that only open space that's acquired through CPA funds can be rehabilitated. So depending on how we want to understand this open space or recreation land and what kind of verb we want to attach to it, it may be ineligible because it was not acquired with CPA funds. And the note may be that if further improvements were made on the site, say a proposal that includes creation of trails potentially or an upgrade of other recreation facilities on the lot, that the parking lot may be more eligible. And at this point, it just sort of sits in this gray area. Is that a fair assessment?
yes, but there's one more thing to that, which is the ownership of the land. And the ownership is in the care and custody of the Conservation Commission, right? And
Is it? Did we confirm that?
I think that was the
It
I,
is.
I
I
don't know if
believe,
that
I
was
believe that it, well, I don't know if it's been recently confirmed, but when we had the conversations about the location of Beale
Mhm.
School, the Conservation Commission was involved because that was a potential site.
Interesting.
I
Well, then it
looked at the property viewer map, and it's labeled Town of Shrewsbury Conservation Commission
Oh.
as the owner. So I would, I don't know how much more.
So I think we need that confirmed,
Mm-hmm.
that the ownership of the property. Again, just speaking my comments on it, right? I think we would need to know who owns it because the owner needs to be, as we are with the other applications on town. The owner has to comment on this application. And the trouble part is that if it's open space, if it's considered open as an open space property, then we can't create open space. We can't create a parking lot on open space. Right? It's not allowable. If it was the land was allowed to be recreation, then it can fall in space. So I think, Martha, we would definitely need your feedback on this
But-
further.
But we recreate on open space. And passive recreation is allowable on open space. And access to that passive recreation has been called out in multiple town planning documents. This may be a bellwether for other projects that come before this committee. So I think it bodes well the time that we spend in figuring this out.
I believe that we're not in a position tonight to be able to weigh in on this. This is my view, and I really believe that the Planning and Economic Department staff would work with the conservation agent to see what the restrictions are and what is feasible to be allowed on that property. It may need to involve the Conservation Commission as well, right, to say whether that can move forward. And then from there, we know there is clearly a need, right? There's clearly a need as specified in the Community Preservation Plan about accessibility to passive recreation. There's already existing passive recreation on that property. There once was a parking space, but before that conservation was made, right, as an active site, right, all that history behind it. I don't think we have enough information tonight, and I think that's my view. I couldn't move forward on that. And even I couldn't even say this is the right checkbox, right? That's why I couldn't say yes right now, eligibility, because we don't know this is the correct checkbox given the property, in my view. Anybody else have a different view or want to comment?
I think that the Trails Committee would welcome a little extra time to look into this, not only from the point of view of the legality and everything, but also of the budgetary situation, because we envisioned a much less expensive project, a much simpler project, and got feedback from the Parks Department that this was going to be an easy project and we shouldn't not worry about it at all, which is not how it turned out so far. So if you just want to table this for a while, and we will work behind the scenes and see what we can, come up with. And if this does not work out for CPC, maybe at some point the town would like to do this with their own funds, which, is another different funding source. I don't know what else I can say at this point. We just need to talk with other people.
So I think that I think we really should let this shake out between Planning and Economic Department element staff, right? Rowan.
Like you don't have enough to do.
Right? To look at this further, right? To see what is allowable, because the need's still there. And this question still needs to be answered, whether it is CPC funded or town, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. All right.
In my view.
One other quick comment from my side is, like, can this be put into preserve what's internally in the area, because there's a lot of infrastructure already in there, right? Maybe we can put into preserve and access to that preserved area.
Is there something that has already deteriorated to a point, or is it preserved? There is no parking lot.
There's no parking lot.
But there used
Not
to
preserving.
be. That's an interesting point, Rajesh, because there used to be, and there is that category, rehabilitate and/or restore.
I know, but this
recreation.
is only for CPC purchased property, and there is not a single piece of land in the town of
Yeah.
Shrewsbury that was purchased with CPC funds, because we
Not
just got
for-
this.
not for
Preserve
recreation.
means-
Preserve is to protect from further harm.
So it'd be
Um,
like creating a long-term protection on
Right.
open space. Wow, or is that maybe we should look
preserving,
into it.
yeah. So this is why this
It's
is
tough.
it's not working out. To Melanie's point, correctly, open space in order to rehabilitate / restore, it has to be a CPA funded open space purchase. So that's why that box could not be checked. So we couldn't
Right.
say we're rehabilitating the pre-existing parking lot, because that area wasn't purchased with CPA monies.
Right.
Nothing was, right, as to your point. So we're having a problem with the box to check it off, and also ownership. So therefore, we can't
Let's
even
look-
question the eligibility at this point. We have to look further to say what is the ownership, and then to make a determination of what is allowable.
Okay, and I'd also like to point out that reluctance of the CPC, I don't know if it's actually written anywhere, their reluctance to approve a parking lot independent of another project. I don't know what to make of that, if that is just their custom, or if there's something written down in the CPC.
Again,
I don't think I saw that anywhere.
my personal view, is that, while hearing that, we already have established a need in our community for more accessibility.
Yes.
And this particular property is so woefully insufficiently accessible, right?
Yes.
That you need to be able to expand access, right?
Yes.
in my
You can't even parachute in.
So I think there's an argument to be made that the town is not able to utilize it well enough because of the accessibility issues. Accessible as in being able to get to it, not from a different kind of accessibility perspective. Okay, I think we can move on. Maybe.
Do we need a motion, though?
We should have a motion. I think my opinion is number 3. I think fits best.
I would agree with you.
Would you like to make
that?
Would you like to make a motion?
Kathy, did you want to?
May I ask a question? How is this, the fact that we could only do something on land that was bought by the CPC, like Traily, that's town-owned land, not purchased by the CPC. How is that different?
And the recreation, because that project is proposing a creation of a new playground.
So then it doesn't have to be land purchased.
The recreation column, at one point, CPA legislation prohibited that aspect of saying, oh, you need to have purchased the land for recreation purposes under CPA. That was removed in 2012 as an amendment. So that's why we can, pre-existing or creation new on land that already exists is allowable to create that. However, in the open space side, it still stipulates that it is restricted. You can't rehabilitate or restore something which wasn't purchased, the land wasn't purchased with CPA monies. So that's why that box is in trouble.
That's an open space limitation?
Open space limitation. And it's actually on screen there too, with that box, the text that's in that intersection.
Yeah, right down at the bottom in the second column.
Yeah,
Yeah.
got it.
You good? Question? You good? Okay. Deborah?
No, it's enough to make your hair fall out.
Playground on it.
So-
Maybe okay.
Yeah, like,
I guess
we
Instead
could
of
put
a
a
parking
jungle
lot,
gym,
put
but
a
we can't put a
playground
parking
on
lot.
So is passive recreation, walking on trails, may that only be considered open space? Because if this were considered a recreation project where it is checked, rehabilitate and restore are eligible. So
Yeah. Yes.
if it were considered recreation, it would be okay.
However, but the other aspect of it is the land restricted from having trails, is it, well, we don't know right now, right? Is there a restriction
Right.
on creating a
If we
parking lot?
could find out what the allowable uses of the land is, I mean, it was a scout camp, so obviously at one time recreation was allowed. But even hiking, and I mean, it's considered passive recreation, but it is recreation.
It isn't recreation.
Passive act.
Martha, do you?
No, well, the passive recreation is different from active recreation. Passive recreation, such as hiking, is an allowable use of open space. Active recreation, such as building a ball field, is not necessarily an allowable use of open space if it's held by conservation.
And do we know what this land is, what it has been determined that this land is it open space or is it recreation space?
It was purchased by, if I'm remembering correctly, from many years ago, it was purchased by the land from the Scouts to be used as conservation or to be held by the Conservation Commission. And that should be in the deed. I believe that was part of the land use survey that we did a few years ago, so the answer should be fairly easy to find. And yes, it was a scout camp and things happened in scout camp, but it was, at that point, it was not held by the town. It was owned by the
town
scouts.
in 96.
Thank you.
Turned over to the town in 96.
Okay. All right. Any other comments before Martha continues with her motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to ask the Planning and Economic Development staff to request comment from the Conservation Commission and the town regarding land ownership and purpose or any restrictions. How about parks? Should we talk to parks too?
Sure.
Or I guess we already talking with
Let's
parks.
get it
Well,
right away.
Parks seem to be okay with it.
Okay,
Oh, did you already talk to them? Did you
I
talk to
don't think
Angela?
they would
I've
have.
been talking to Parks right along, sure.
No.
okay, so whoever can provide information on restrictions, in order for the CPC to make a recommendation for the feasibility of this project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Another deal. All those in favor will say aye. So Rajesh.
Aye.
Okay. Deborah.
Aye.
Okay. Melanie.
Aye.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. No. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
Sorry,
oh,
sorry.
Never mind. You didn't hear
Your
that.
vote has been stricken from the record. Abstained. Okay.
I'm a
Sorry.
creature of habit.
So am I.
Yeah.
I asked. I apologize. Put you on the spot. Testing you. Martha.
Aye.
Okay. Gail.
Aye.
Perna.
Aye.
Okay. Jim.
Aye.
Kathy.
Aye.
Okay. What was that?
Aye.
Thank you. And myself, aye. Okay, approved. All right, moving on. Number 7, District 5 Schoolhouse ADA Phase 1 Facility Review. Rowan, would you give us some background, please?
Okay. So this is, actually, let me just double check here on this ownership. I believe this project is on, it's on town land. However, Shrewsbury Historical Society owns the District 5 Schoolhouse. So the town of Shrewsbury, I guess, has filled out this co-sponsorship requirement. I think I will have to work with our council to understand who needs to provide that written consent, if anyone from the town, given it's just the land that the town owns. But I think that is outside of the concerns about eligibility right now.
Right.
The coalition did clarify that, so ADA kind of review is a eligible use of CPA funds, and that studies more broadly are also allowed if the end kind of result of what the study would accomplish is eligible for CPA funds. So in this case, because the ADA update is eligible, the study for it is also eligible. One other thing to note is that because this building is not owned by the town, the CPC would have to seek some kind of, ensure some kind of public benefit, I believe is the language. We can get into that further down the road, but I would advise that the CPC consider this. The coalition advised that because this is such a small project, that the community benefit is likely going to be considered the review itself, but in the future, if larger projects come forth that are on non-public lands, things such as a preservation restriction on the building, a clawback agreement to pay back the funds if it was ever privatized, and or sign agreements with community groups that they could use the building X amount of days, are all examples of things that the CPA could request, because again, this building is privately owned. Anything else?
Nope, I think that was it. Okay, comments? Gail?
Oh, that's just, Rowan answered all my concerns. This is a complicated site because that schoolhouse has been open to the public in the past, where they've held classes and open houses during the festival. So it does serve a public interest to have that ADA compliant so that it can be used. It's a shame to have such a resource sitting there and not being utilized. So I think the society and the applicant have done their due diligence in their application process and presenting the information. And my concern was what happens if the facility review comes back that there's no way it can become ADA compliant. But I guess that you answered that question. So I'm certainly in favor of, if this is eligible, of it going forward.
Okay. And I think also to remind that this building is on the National Historic Register as illustrated.
Correct.
So that is eligible by right of the building. Okay, so with that, I think one of the things to consider is that this ADA review should factor in that it is that they would have to be also subject to the Department of Interior regulations relative to rehabilitation of a historic resource. So that's a given, but I think that should be specified back to the Historic Society as well, and to Keith Bollinger, right, as a co-sponsor.
I'm not sure if that's gonna be officially required, but we could maybe just have it, just in case.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. So we need a motion,
I'll make a motion.
please.
I make a motion that the proposed eligibility form for the project entitled District 5 Schoolhouse Accessibility Transition Plan Phase 1 Facility Review is eligible for CPA funding, and that the applicant be invited to apply for a full funding application. Do we need to put the caveat with the Secretary of Interior in that, or is that just in the motion?
It doesn't need to be, I
No,
don't think.
I think that in the next phase, probably in the next round.
Well,
It-
just throw it in, I'll put it in.
Please do, yeah,
Okay,
please do, yeah, because who they're reaching out to should have that hat on.
okay,
Mm.
okay.
So
Noted.
So how?
noted, so noted?
Noted.
So noted, yeah, with the addition of compliance with Secretary of Interior standards should apply.
Okay,
Second.
That close enough.
all right.
Kathy seconded it?
Yeah, thank you. And
Sorry.
Melanie, I just want to make sure that if you ever have a question about who said what, please.
I've got, I'll go to the tape.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right, thank you.
It's okay.
All right, thank you. All right, so the
Moment
motion's
11.
been made. All those in favor, we'll go down the line. Rajesh?
Aye.
Okay. Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Perna?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion passes. Next, 1830 Schoolhouse ADA improvements. So another building, back to 1830 Schoolhouse.
Yep.
Okay.
Rowan?
Okay. So, this 1830 Schoolhouse as already covered, town-owned, so we'll need an eligibility, or excuse me, co-sponsor form. Coalition's comments, similar to the last, it is eligible, and just to make the applicant aware that these ADA improvements may necessitate further ADA compliance, and that they should contact the building department to understand those kinds of requirements for when you start, messing with an old building, what other requirements will need to be updated.
So this is where if you're gonna do two projects at the same building, I mean, that's gotta be coordinated, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece here about what's gonna move forward. I think that, in my perspective, going to November, I'd wanna see that these two, if they were to both go forward, I'd wanna see that they'd have to be, coordinated the same. same body said that if Keith, Mr. Bollinger is associated with one, should be part of the other. Just coordinated so that they know what's going on. And as you already, we're going to reach out to building, the building department?
Building department.
Building.
Yeah. You know, I think knowing that, if we're doing HVAC and we're doing this ADA, you know, does that trigger one versus the other, or do you have to do one versus the other, or anything else? You know, like just all those questions behind it, in dealing with a historic resource. Of course, all this has to be within the guidelines of, you know, adherence to the Secretary of Interior, right, on rehabilitation of a historic resource. So we can't get away from that, and that's something we would want to see. I would want to see if we were to approve this in November, is that they would comply to that standard, because that's required. Okay. Any other comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
Well, how do we do this? This-
Sounds like just like you did with the last one, which is this and ...
Yeah, okay. If I can remember. All right, I make a motion that the proposed eligibility form for the project entitled 1830 Brick School Exterior ADA Improvements is eligible for CPA funding, and that the applicant be invited to apply for the full funding application, providing applicant confers with the building department as, what do we want them to confer with?
So, yeah, regarding updates to ADA accessibility and in combination with the other proposed project?
Yes.
Right, and that, that the guidelines of the Secretary of Interior standards be applied. And what else? That's it, all right? Okay, that's the
And kitchen
motion.
sink. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Good job, Gail.
Thanks,
I hope
Gail.
this gets easier in the next
Yeah,
round.
yeah. All right, all those in favor of this, you say aye, so we'll move on. Rajesh?
Aye.
Okay. Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Brenna?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion passes. Next, number 9 is Prospect Park Pergola Restoration.
Oh, God, come on again.
Home stretch. We're going to get there.
We're doing well.
Yes.
All right.
We're doing well.
Go. So, this is a historic preservation project. Do we need to call a recess? Let's,
Would you like a recess? Oh, yep.
Well, we still have a quorum, don't we?
We still have a
Okay.
quorum.
We
Still have a
have a
quorum.
quorum.
Yeah,
Still have a quorum.
Okay.
sure. Okay, so this is a historic preservation project for the Prospect Park Pergola. And the comments from our folks at the coalition were as follows, that this is an eligible project so long as the historic significance is, voted on by our historic commission. And that, again, design phases are eligible, especially because these types of costs will be needed to move forward with a project such as this, again, which it would be eligible for funding so long as they've gotten this determination of historical significance. Just note that, Gail, if you want to provide an update, we can please do, but otherwise, if you need any assistance sorting out that determination, I can be a resource as well.
All right, well, just as an update, you want me to
Please do.
comment? Okay. The Historical Commission met last week. Yeah, was it last week already?
What's Monday? Yeah, it must have been.
Yeah, no, it was 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago, I guess. Anyway, we have been reviewing this as part of our whole inventory of town resources and our home inventory. As that's winding down, we've been looking at different resources in town as well. And so this is kind of falls into that next round of historical resources that we are looking at. The pergola does, in our estimation, we created a rubric to kind of evaluate the different resources, and it certainly does fall into the historic significance because of it is the last above-ground part of that whole estate, the Whittall estate. And the Whittalls were a huge contributing factor to the manufacturing industry, to the culture of Shrewsbury. It goes to the history of the town and the cultural significance of it, the importance of the person that lives there, all the factors that you would have to evaluate on the registry of historic places. And we use that in the coalition's determination of what would create historical significance. And it really did fall into place. So there are some concerns about the project going forward as far as how they structure the work, but as far as designating it as a historic resource and historically significant, it does qualify. We will be sending a letter to the CPC noting that, and it is in the process of being put on the state resource list, the MACRIS. So it's kind of in the works. This came quicker than we anticipated, but it's in progress. So by the time the project gets into the funding aspect, it should be all set.
All right, thank you.
I mean, I could give you history on the site, but I don't think we need to do that tonight. It does qualify. Based on the coalition and the historic registry qualifications, it qualifies as a historic resource.
So it's marked as it's going to be your follow-up email from the Historic Commission is going to specify that the determination of this structure is a local historic resource.
Right.
And that's why it makes it eligible.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. I do want to note that the proponent checked off the preserve box for historic preservation. I think there, but then, obviously in the commentary, it's preserve and restore. Certainly at this point, I know that it's an assessment, so they'll be looking at it from, all angles.
Mm-hmm.
I think just to know that if it falls on the preserving, it's to protect it from further harm. So basically, you're not recreating anything. You're keeping it as is and before it further deteriorates. And if it goes down to rehabilitate or restore, then you kick in that, the Department's Secretary of Interior rules about rehabilitating
Right.
these structures. So I think I'm personally okay with this letting this be an evaluation perspective to see what is even feasible.
Exactly. It's in pretty rough shape.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions about this? Okay. All right. Gail, this is your role in this historic preservation. Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that the proposed eligibility form for the project entitled Prospect Park Pergola Restoration is eligible for CPA funding and the applicant be invited to apply for the full funding application.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor, we're going to say aye. I'm going by roll call. Rajesh?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Perna?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion carries. Okay, it is 9:09. We do have 4 more projects ahead of us. And looking at the agenda, we also have
The rest of
commentary about the community preservation membership, scoring documentation, correspondence, and next steps. If we can get to, I would like to keep going with at least the proposals, because, I think we're on a roll. And I think that perhaps there is an opportunity to postpone the other agenda items, unless you have a disagreement, or the other need to.
Maybe if the board could just vote to, about the community preservation membership,
I'm
that's
sure.
due, well, informally, but I think we should get that
Okay.
tonight, unfortunately.
Okay. All right, no problem with that.
Can be
Anybody want to recess for 5 minutes, since we're already 2 hours in?
I'm okay.
Good.
No, you good? Okay.
If I recess, I'm going to sleep.
Okay, all right, no problem. All right, moving
Deborah
on.
fell asleep.
Number 10, Dean Park basketball courts.
So, this is what it sounds like. This is for, actual installation of these basketball courts, I believe. So this is a rehabilitation of the backboards, the fences, the courts themselves. They're rebuilding, and making improvements on them. So this is an eligible, use of CPA funds, and the only question that came up in the meeting, and because this is a recreation project, this is clearly a capital improvement, and the only thought, because this is submitted by our Parks and Rec department, was the question of supplanting funds. What does that mean? But in general, the coalition clarified for us that supplanting really only occurs if money was already allocated for this precise use. Let's say this was a budget item that was approved at town meeting for the Parks and Recs department, but they thought, hey, we should try CPA first, see if we can use those funds. That would be supplanting. This iteration of the project is not supplanting because there are no existing funds to do this project, and that's why we have CPA.
Jim, do you agree with the prospect that this hasn't been already approved?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
That is correct. I did, and it's in the application, but I did want to say that it is part of the master plan that the BSC group did provide for us back in 2018 or 2019. So it is part of an overall plan, but there's never been any money allocated for it.
Right, so part of the needs assessment?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, great. Any other questions, comments about this application? Okay, not hearing any. Take a motion.
Sure. I'll make a motion that the proposed eligibility form for the project entitled Dean Park Courts is eligible for CPA funding, and that the applicant be invited to apply for a full funding application.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, let's go down the roll call, as usual. Rajesh?
Aye.
Aye, good. Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Perna?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion carries. Next is number 11, townwide playground assessment.
All right, I'm going to turn that one back over to you as the chair. I was not in attendance at the meeting at this point, but you can make the comments.
Sure. So this is, no surprise, it goes down the path of the same comments that the coalition made about assessments in general. So if the assessment is for the purposes of looking to see what is, if this is an eligibility question here, then it is going to be an eligible use. There is, though, just a practical matter for the CPC is that we also want to, not necessarily about eligibility, but just a general comment. It'd be our best practice that we're not loading up a particular year with all assessments, right? So we want to be able to show value back to the community faster. Doesn't comment about this one particularly, but I'm just saying in general, if we start looking at lots of assessments coming through. So this is, it's to look at whether, of our existing playgrounds and where there is a need to rehabilitate or restore them. And obviously that kind of falls in line with the first project, right, the Arrowwood project. So I think this is an opportunity for the for those parties to discuss whether to move forward with number one as on their terms, right? We're certainly saying that was eligible when we discussed the first project. Okay. Any other questions or comments relative to this proposal?
Was there an estimated budget?
60,000.
60.
65?
And there's just a quick clarification. So it's not part of any pre-existing. So we are not supplementing towns' funds or activities, right? With this one.
No. Well, it is my understanding that we are not. My understanding is that there have not been funds for this particular type of assessment. Of course, I know we've had like master plans and other guiding documents that have occurred, but no, I think there is no money allocated for this now. If we as a committee want to just double check that, we absolutely can, but I don't know. Do you have any other?
Since I've been part of the commission,
Right.
there's never been an assessment on,
Oh.
it's always been as needed type
Right.
of thing, like we're doing Deep Park today. Like, I don't think there's ever been any kind of money allocated to say, let's look at it townwide.
There's a one-time report that's on Fort Park development development plan. I think we're part of those reports that are attached in the CPA document booklet, right? So
The four
that
parks
time-
plan.
Yeah, so what the BSC did was, that's not, so I believe this assessment is not looking at just that. I think it's looking at actual playgrounds throughout the entire town, i.e., so there's a playground at Turnberry, there's a playground at Arrowwood, there's a playground at Edgemere Park, there are playgrounds throughout the entire community that have never really been looked at from a, feasibility of, should we do something with this playground, or, should we rehabilitate it or leave it as is? So, that other thing that the BSC did focused on Maple Ave, Dean Park, Lake Street, and, whatever's behind Parker Road, like, that's where they focused on those four specific areas, and they were just really from a recreational point of view, what should be done with them. It wasn't necessarily focused on playgrounds, if that helps.
No, just a clarification, right? I saw that report. So,
Yep.
So this will be a initial thing, like there will be a follow-up thing. So how the community is?
I'm assuming that based on how the assessment comes out, that maybe there will be potentially follow-up, or there may just be a designation of not now type of thing,
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Also reading here that this project will also include design and bid specifications for Edgemere Park Playground, which is over 30 years old. So it gets us started with that aspect. So the idea is that, from there, that triggers a CPA eligible project if it was rehabilitating of a playground. Edgemere, that is. Okay.
May I just make a comment that
Yes.
I in trying to think about this request and this assessment, it strikes me that it's similar to funding requests for assessing historic documents that the town might have, for example. So it's assessing town resources.
Yes. Is that
That's just my comment.
is it
It's not a
negative or
question.
is it negative or positive or?
Yeah, I think it's a positive.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I see this as it will basically give us a punch list, right, of the next playgrounds that they need to have work, so that we'll know what's next. Okay. Yes.
One last
Go for
thing.
it. Yeah,
So
go for it.
Do we have a timeline on this?
Yeah. So the proponent has it down below. What is your anticipated timeline for this project? This project would start in July 2023. The goal is to have the site assessments done in the summer and then work on the prioritization of the needs in early fall. The design of Edgemere Park will take place in the summer and have cost estimates for the fall.
Thank you.
I think it's a good idea, and I think it'll make our job easier next year when we have to make some decisions about what parks to do.
Okay. Take a motion?
I'll make a motion to The proposed eligibility form for the project entitled Playground Assessment is eligible for CPA funding, and the applicant be invited to apply for the full funding application.
Second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of the motion, go down the roll call. Say aye. Rajesh?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Perna?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. All right, motion carries. All right. I need to step away for a moment. Oh, I know, so just keep. Let me introduce Landscape and Environmental Education Program. Rowan, if you can take comments, thank you.
Well,
I'm sorry, Rowan, if you can introduce,
y'all introduce it and then we'll have,
I will be back.
sure.
Less than you can be done. Yep.
Perhaps can you just say, in your absence?
In my absence,
Deb?
Deborah Mooney is the vice chair, so she will be responding to any
Great.
actions in my absence. 30 seconds.
All right, so the India Society of Worcester met with planning staff to discuss the proposed project as stated in this eligibility form. The form or the project itself is to it kind of is highlighted in this last statement, is to develop a culturally significant outdoor space at the India Center in collaboration with Tower Hill Botanical Garden. And the outdoor design will be educational. It'll have different activities, community gardens and trails, and other educational outdoor spaces. So, my comments from the coalition are that this type of use as kind of an outdoor recreation space is an allowable use for CPA funds. The sticking point is that this is on private land. It's nonprofit land, and so we would need to, as a committee, and with the applicant, make sure that the understanding is set that they are eligible, but they need to again have some kind of prove that they can provide some kind of public benefit. So that's likely going to require an access easement for a certain amount of time. Usually 30 years, and that's something that the coalition has examples on, and that we would work with council on, and again, the applicant to make sure that they're comfortable entering into this agreement. But that would have to be condition. It's my recommendation that that's a condition of eligibility and also of funding, if it is provided. For Jason or Melanie, if you wanted to provide any other comment based on their conversation, my understanding was that it is eligible, though, outside of the kind of concern about access, public access.
They had made a remark about maybe having a trail that would end up at the Donahue Rowing Center. And I did not see a map anywhere, but if I looked at the town map, they are adjacent to a piece of property that is water department land. Mm-hmm. Then there is a federal property, which is the post office. Mm-hmm. And then across the street is the Donahue Rowing Center. And I wonder if that is, a significant part of this project at this point, that they would, I'm pretty sure that they would not be allowed to cross the federal land. Mm-hmm. Unless there is a sidewalk along the street that they could access. I don't know if there is on, what is that, North Quincy or South Quincy?
Yes.
That's North Quincy, isn't it? Yeah.
They do include that in the narrative, so I'll admit it is a little confusing. But when speaking to the applicant in our meeting, and I apologize for not saying this earlier, I encourage them to only pursue the part of the project that's on the India Society land, and that's because I spoke to DPW, who clarified that there will not be any public access onto those directly adjacent parcels that are owned by the water department.
Right.
And that's because there's water infrastructure on the land, and I communicated that back to the applicant, who I understood to kind of be tabling the walking path idea. they've included it here, but I think the priority is the upgrades of their space.
Okay, so, all right, we don't have to worry about that then.
Sorry, that's a long way to say.
All right.
Yeah, maybe
Okay,
Right, so it's
that's
saying
been
that,
addressed.
that the first phase of this plan is part of the proposal, of this proposal, utilizing only projects on ISW-owned land. In future years, we'll aim, right, and that's not part of the scope, right? So we're
Right.
not committing to that part. I mean, I think I applaud them for bringing forward a project idea. In my view of it, I feel that it's that this proposal is not crafted strong enough to know what it is that's being proposed. A walking path, a gardening, or landscaping. I mean, it's
Everywhere.
yeah, it's a little nebulous, right? If it's a walking path, does that mean it's a sidewalk? You know, it's not really the spirit of CPA, right? Is it a garden? I'll get to Deborah in a moment, but you know, is it a community garden? Well, we hear that's eligible, right? Based on obviously other communities have done that. But is any restriction that this is has to be open space to be a community garden, or does it have to be recreation to be a community? So I think there's more questions than there are answers in this case about the parameters of this proposal. Certainly walking from Main Street onto this property is not a CPA eligible piece of it, right? That's sidewalks, right? But I see where they're trying to go with that. So like I'm having a hard time kind of grasping around the parameters of this proposal. Not to say there couldn't be something had here, but I think it's not developed further enough to be in the CPA eligibility realm. Now, whatever is done, if it were to move forward, given that this is private land, the owner, right, SW, would have to be willing to restrict. Okay, they have to be willing to restrict their property for the public benefit, right? So they'd have to be willing to take that on, or. If it's over 30 years, they have to go to the State House, right, for approval. If it's under 30 years, so if it's at 29 years and 29 years and
11 months.
in 11 months, then it's within the confines here. But it's a long time, right? It is a pure community benefit. That's my view.
And you said restrict their property or open up their,
Open up.
Restricting their property to ensure that the public funds are going to continue on for public good for that period of time, and with a clawback provision should they sell in the future,
Right.
so that we can get the
Conservation.
public monies back. So that's a lot of conditions there,
Oh, yeah.
but also not knowing what it is we're conditioning around, right?
So, is this a private land, private owned? Is it not a non-profit or a commercial entity?
I believe they're a 501c3,
Nonprofit.
but I don't think that necessarily matters in terms of our determination of this agreement. We can certainly, my understanding is that they do have some preliminary plans, or at least some preliminary thoughts, right, of layout. We could certainly request that from the applicant, and continue this conversation on the 3rd with any supplemental information they can provide that gives a bit more detail of what the amenities will actually look like. That's if you would like. It's a question.
Also, it looks like they
Table.
Over it, please.
look like they mentioned about the partnership with Tower Hill Botanical Garden, but they didn't say provided any consent or supporting document from them.
They're working with horticultural staff to plan the garden, is my understanding. But we could certainly ask for more information.
And how much are they asking? My computer froze.
Oh, okay, no problem.
25.
25 total.
So did yours?
No, 25,000.
25,000?
Which is
I mean,
about
see-
half of the total
Yeah.
budget that they're estimating.
For $25,000, that seems to be, the restriction of like 30 years seem to be pretty tough, I don't know if they would be interested in that 30-year restriction on that property for $25,000 funding. And this is going to be one-time funding, right?
It's right. It's only the approval is in 1 year, and it's good for that timeframe. Yeah.
Just my thought.
My concern when I saw this was that it was private property, but now that you talk about the, restriction, that changes things a little bit. And I guess the only other question I would have would be maintenance. You can't plant a garden and then never deal with it again, so who's gonna be responsible for maintaining it?
Good point.
I'm always in the garden club.
Sure.
Well, I think maybe we should table it until the next meeting, given that asking for some more information. I was concerned that without seeing any diagrams or schematics of where it goes and what the materials were to be used, that I was, like you say, it's kind of nebulous. I can't make a decision because I don't have enough information.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing how much is visible from the street, because that would be, something that you could see as you drive by would be a real public benefit and would, beautify the town. But on the other hand, if it's in the backyard,
Well, if it incorporates sidewalks along the road, that's not, except that's not a,
Hold on, let's go with Deborah.
These are all really, really good questions. Right now, we're determining if they're eligible or not. So we can certainly go back to them with what we need to know whether or not it's eligible. And we can make suggestions of what we'd like to see if we do deem it eligible. But it doesn't have to be a good application yet, but we don't have to debate the merits of it. We just have to decide if it's eligible or not.
Right.
except if they're proposing sidewalks, we don't know what the trails are, or the walking paths are. If it's a sidewalk along Main Street or North Quinsigamon, I don't think that's an allowable
Well,
use.
that's when we would reject a full proposal. If they tell us they're building, that they want money for a garden open to the public and trails, and then we say, oh, CPC does that sort of thing. And then their final full application that is submitted talks about sidewalks and things we don't do, we say thank you, but no. We don't have to decide right now if we'll actually fund it when this is all said and done. I think there is some more information we might need to understand if it is a garden with public access or if it's a trail. Like you said, Gail, you weren't sure what they were trying to build. We could ask them for clarification on that and then decide on the 3rd if it's eligible or not. But right now, at 9:32 p.m., it's just whether or not it's eligible, not whether or not we like it.
And there's not enough information to make that determination at this point.
Right.
So
Which questions do we need to ask them to make that determination?
I believe I think they need to clarify. I think there's an opportunity. They certainly, they're new to this, we're new to this. I'd like to see them have an opportunity to revise this further, to hone in on what they're asking.
Sure.
Right, so I think they should revise to clarify their ask at this time and provide any supporting material to help us make that determination about what it is they're trying to do.
That's excellent. We don't have enough information to determine your eligibility. Could you please clarify your project, provide more information?
Yeah, some drawings, some, that is.
So moved.
I make, second.
Do you want me to make a full motion?
As long as I think are we all in understanding?
You got it?
I think.
We're asking them for more information to clarify.
But we're actually rejecting the application today.
No, we're not making it.
rejecting it.
So it doesn't meet the criteria. Is it not eligible?
How about we could adapt option
Can't
3.
tell.
Just say, making a motion, right, for staff to request more information.
Okay, that's what I was asking. I want to make sure I was clarified on what we
Yeah.
were
Great,
saying.
yeah, okay, great, yeah.
Yeah,
So we're not
Clarify.
saying, no.
We're not saying-
Yeah, we are not.
We need more.
Right.
we need
To
more.
make determination.
Right.
Okay.
If they need to revise their document to make it more clear, so be it, right? But
Okay.
Or make a motion?
I can't make the motion.
So should we, so,
Whatever
how about if I make a motion, right? So.
Sure, make it clear.
Motion to ask the ISW, right, to provide more commentary on the actual project, to include diagrams and thoughts that they have on what the project will consist of before we determine whether the project's eligible or not.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye when I get to you. Rajesh?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Perna?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Approved. Motion carries. Okay, last one. Number 13, lucky 13, historic gravestone restoration, phase 1 inventory and assessment. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, right.
I wasn't there.
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay,
But-
all right. No problem.
Yes.
Again, no surprise. It goes along with assessing, right? So this is what the coalition said. One thing is the subject of the assessment has to be a historic resource. So the caveat here is that whatever is being looked at is historic. Now, being the fact that it's within the historic part of the cemetery, the nationally historic determined plot, the asterisk there is, if there are stones that they're evaluating, or looking to evaluate that they're actually replicas of the originals, that's not eligible,
Okay.
right? So if somewhere in 1920, that stone replaced something from 1700s, no, unless that stone specifically was determined eligible, right? So if it's original and it's part of that section that's deemed on the National Registrar,
Well, how would you know that until you look at it, until you assess it? You have to assess it to know whether it was a duplicate or the original.
fair, but moving forward, if it says that's a replica, then it can't be, right? So I think back to the proponent here, if this were to go forward, is eligibility is restricted to the historic section, right?
Right.
But inclusive of that is the gravestones need to also be
Yep.
original.
To be assessed, they need to be original.
I think determination whether original can happen, but further work, a phase 2 cannot be on something that's not original unless it's historic itself as well.
Okay.
Restoration and preserve cannot be, yeah.
I don't think there's any, I think everybody realizes that that area of the cemetery needs an awful lot of tending to. And although they didn't have to, the applicants came before the Historical Commission and presented their project, which we certainly applaud them for. And the National Park Service and the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation have put together a really comprehensive an orderly way of preserving and restoring cemeteries and the maintenance programs. And the Historic District Commission has really done their due diligence in putting together a master plan. And this is the first phase, which is the assessment phase. And there would be possibly more assessment phases in the future because they can't do all of them at once. These projects generally take years and years to complete, so this isn't something that's going to, like you walk in there and this needs fixing and you do it. It's got to be very methodical and done correctly, and they really have done their due diligence, and I applaud them for that. So I think they're on the right track to make it a viable project and something that it's certainly needed. It's kind of an open museum, the cemetery, and it tells the history of Shrewsbury, it tells the history of the area. So it's worth preserving, and I'm so happy that they've brought this project forward. So I hope that it's looked at with positivity, and you know, I know it's eligible because it's in the historic registry. It's in only the historic sections that they're looking at, so I don't think there's too much gray matter here.
Okay. Okay, so this is the inventory and assess the condition of the gravestones and the historic section of Mountain View Cemetery, which is phase 1. And then later on, they'll come back for the preservation and restoration work. Okay, and I like that they also put here, all restoration work will comply with the Secretary of Interior standards
Yes.
for the treatment of historic properties. It just speaks to it. Well, that's great. They've done their due diligence on this. Okay, any other comments, questions at this point? Okay. Take a motion?
I make a motion that the proposed eligibility form for the project entitled Mountain View Cemetery Historic Gravestone Restoration, Phase 1 Inventory Assessment, is eligible for CPA funding, and that the applicant be invited to apply for the full funding application and follow all Secretary guidelines, Secretary of the Interior guidelines.
Okay.
Second.
Second.
All right. All right, all those in favor, say aye when I get to your name. Rajesh?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Perna?
Aye.
Jim?
I,
Kathy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion carries approved. Okay. Congratulations, we just completed eligibility form
Yes.
review.
Yay.
For the majority of these, they are coming back, which is great, or more questions. So it's good, very good. Thank you to the community. If you're care to be watching 2 hours and 41 minutes into this meeting, thank you very much for your submissions. This is a watershed moment for the committee. Okay, next topic is discuss and vote on the community preservation membership. Rowan, would you like to say some words relative to that?
Okay, so we have a request, or just the coalition has invited us to be a member. We have member dues that we would pay out of our administrative funds for the amount of $2,875. I will say that as staff, Coalition is a really important resource to myself, and find it really beneficial to support you as the committee. So if it's fair for me to say, that'd be my recommendation, is to be a member. We have, I don't have our full administrative funds, but I think it's like 50,000. Does that
Yep,
sound
it's over
right,
50,
Jason?
yes.
So given that, it's about, I can't do math right now, but it's a small percentage.
Small percentage. The coalition was very instrumental in our starting up. We've leveraged them highly. You heard tonight that we've also, tapped into them as a resource to help give us background into these reviews. And they will continue on. They've given us, a customary, first year, as we've already, exhausted that time. And now to continue forward in their advocacy, they need to be successful to further advocate for Shrewsbury and other CPA adopted communities, and even to advocate for additional monies or additional changes to the legislation. So I think I'm in total favor of supporting the the coalition, so that they can continue to advocate for CPA to benefit us and the community at large. So I would say yes, in my perspective. Any other comments or questions?
I second that totally, because I, saw how good they were with us getting the ballot question passed, supported us in every way possible, made us fully informed. We couldn't have done it on our own at all. It would have been impossible. I think they do excellent work. They've got, there are 189 communities in the state. few more to go.
Yes.
And I salute them. I think they're doing wonderful work. So, yeah, I would vote for this.
And I would agree, is this an annual thing, or so are we being prorated for the rest of this year, or does our membership go from October 1st to October 1st, or?
It is annual, and given that we go fiscal, I think this is going to be, given for the full fiscal year.
I can confirm that, but I don't have the answer tonight.
I'm in favor of it just for all the reasons that were cited, but it would be, hate to have to re-up January 1st, the same amount,
Yeah.
Right. Well, I can have the answer by the next meeting if you would like to hold the vote, otherwise.
No, I think we
No, I
can
think-
vote. We can.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
mean, I
wouldn't be a
think.
yay or nay for me based on that information, I'm just curious.
And I think that comes in the line of authorizing up to the amount specified, which is at 2,875 for the year. Certainly, if it's less than that, great. Otherwise, the authority that the CPC is given is to say yes for this amount. We'll say that it is a sliding scale based on the amount of local CPA revenue. It is published on the website. So if we were to creep into the next category, it would be 3,500. And then if we got into the million to 2 million, it's 4,350. So if we're not talking big money at all, even if we move into the next category from local receipts.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Worth
any other
every
questions or
penny.
comments before taking a motion?
Worth every penny.
Agreed.
I would like to ask whoever makes the motion for this amount
Yes.
in the motion, which I can make as big as possible.
Okay.
I move that we agree to become members of the Community Preservation Coalition with a payment of $2,875 annually, as long as that is the assessed number.
Just for this.
Yes, yeah.
Just
For this year, okay, for this year. Yes, I guess I can't spend money ahead of time. Okay, let me rephrase that. I move that we become a member of the Community Preservation Coalition and pay the dues of $2,875 for this year.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye when I get to your name. Okay. Rajesh?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Aye.
Martha? Gail?
Aye.
Verna?
Aye.
Jim?
I,
Kathy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Approved. Okay. Next is discuss project scoring document. I'll be very light in my comments. Once we get past eligibility, the next step obviously is to review those full funding application. Proposed a way for us individually to score the projects, and then we can tally those totals, all our totals together, and see, hey, what's that weighting? What's that total score look like? It's not the only measure for moving forward with an approval at the full funding phase. It's just an ingredient going into deliberation, for ourselves and as an individual and as a whole body. Certainly there could be other circumstances that would say yes or no based on that, but it's just one more thing into our evaluation. If you're ready to prepare comments for tonight, we can certainly talk about that here. But I think that in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into it. Does anybody have any initial thoughts on that evaluation? Deborah? No? Just like, please turn it off already. Okay. All right. It'll have to be a focus of our October meeting anyway, because obviously we've done a lot of the homework already for the eligibility. And so we'll have to dive into that. So please do take that time to review that before our next meeting. Okay, moving on to the next item. Is there any correspondence to discuss?
Not beyond what was mentioned and addressed in our eligibility discussions.
Okay, thank you. All right, great. And then next steps. Rowan's got them all. Thank you very much. Anything else that any members like to bring up at this time? Okay, so we'll be back in October, reviewing the remainder, and anything from that point relative to scoring and getting ready for the next phase of our project. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Roll call
Anybody want a
vote.
second? Yeah. All right. All those in favor say aye when I get to your name. Okay, Rajesh?
Aye.
Okay, Deborah?
Aye.
Melanie?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Verna?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Myself, aye. We are adjourned. See you in
One fast.
October.
Yeah.